What's happening, fellers? Here we are in our second part of the 64 Ford Thunderbird Revivalations, and we're starting getting into the charging system that just doesn't. So to start with, I've started going through all my wiring and connections, and they're not very good. Cleaned up on a bunch of those. Our next step here, before I go trying to pinpoint the voltage regulator not working, because it does seem like we've lost field power to the alternator spinny guy, which would indicate either a broke connection somewhere or the voltage regulator isn't working, because he turns the field on and off to regulate the charging so we don't overcharge the battery and explode something. So before I get further into that, we also have the key issue where she cranks in the run position. So I have my start wire unhooked from the solenoid. We turn her to run and hit it with the jumpy switch. I have a new ignition switch for the guy, and I believe before we get more into the wiring out there, just in case my faulty ignition switch, what's causing us to crank and run, just in case that's my issue with power getting to the field, we're going to go ahead and get inside the car, and I'll show you the little trick I learned on YouTube about how to remove the original ignition switch. You got to put the key in the guy and turn it to the left and get a paper clip, and yeah, we'll get to that right now and swap that ignition switch first, and then we'll double verify that we still aren't charging. You gotta like push in on the trim ring. There's a spring on the back side of this guy, see right here, so you gotta like push it forward against the spring tension, and then you can push down on this trim ring, and then it'll let you do the click to the side and slide off. See how she's set up? Yeah. And now the ignition switch should come out the back. Maybe. Possibly. Oh, there it is. You have to line the guys up again. There's another set of the tabbies for them to go through. And now we can undo the get to the bolt. It's very hard to get to the nut on the back side of this thing while it's mounted in place. But now with it all pulled out, we can take that off pretty easy. Transfer to the new unit and see if it doesn't take care of our problem. Now we've got our switch connector removed, which is a bit of a pain because the thing slides down like inside of this casing here, so it takes a lot of wiggling and a lot of time, and eventually you get the 3 connections to come loose and it'll pop up. But now we've cleaned up on those 3 connections with connector spray, got in there with a wire brush a little bit, and cleaned up this ground wire that attaches to the back side of the switch. So now we'll plug all that back in. Alright now. You may be able to tell by the fact that I have the ignition switch all pulled back out and I'm digging into the wiring that didn't solve our cranking issue. However, I did learn what had happened. See, probing these wires off the back of the switch, I've determined that the red wire with the blue stripe is the crank signal wire. When you turn the key all the way to run, and off no power, run no power, but when you turn it to crank, that wire gets energized, you let off the key, it goes back to run, that power goes out. So, bring you to the front. There's these 2 wires that hook to the 2 studs on the solenoid. I don't know what the one stud and the one wire do. I know on my truck that one stud is unused, but here they had this brown wire stubbed to the start terminal down there, and they had the red wire on this other one, and I figured out that this brown wire has power when the key is on. This red wire with the blue stripe here is supposed to have power when you hit crank. So I've switched those wires backwards, of course, and when you hit the key there's no crankage. I'm sure that's probably what happened to them when they put the solenoid in and then they put them the other way. But this red wire is supposed to be triggering that, but for some reason we've lost power here. We have it on the key, but it doesn't make it all the way to here. Most likely there's a fusible link somewhere in the wiring harness between here and there that has blown. So what we're doing is routing a new wire from our red with the blue stripe all the way back around over here, and it'll tie in where red with blue stripe's supposed to go, and then that'll solve our key issue. Okay, now I got my new wire run. Both our connectors are reconnected on the guy. The starting solenoid. Now we'll hook the battery up. Just maybe. Now when we turn the key on, oh, that's a good sign, but does it crank? Hey, it tried to start. One issue resolved. Hey, now we're going to go ahead and fire it off again, just in case, because I was just thinking about how that one wire on the solenoid had power when the key was on and the other one was the crank wire. Wouldn't that be convenient if the one that has power in the run position all the time? Wouldn't that be neat if that somehow had something to do with why the alternator wasn't charging? I don't think so, because I'm not familiar with why the alternator field would be tied to the solenoid, but I also don't know anything about that second post on the solenoid that's unused in my vehicle, so you never know. Also, little update on the things wrong with the electricals. I previously said the fuel gauge works. Well, she's got power anyway. You can see it's pegged all the way over to the top, and the thing has a new tank and probably new sending unit in it. That's a good sign something's hooked up backwards, because whenever you ground the gauge out, it'll read all the way full. So yeah, whatever's going on with the feed and the fuel gauge is grounded out somewhere. Moving forward with our no chargulating issues, I've looked into the voltage regulator and found that we have power coming in, but we don't have our couple volts going out to the field on the alternator. So I thought I'd be clever, and my 80s truck out there uses the same regulator. See, I got a little stack of them here. None of those work. But I tried my regulator in here. Made no difference to anything. Still no charging pixels. So I put it back in my truck. I did notice the next day when I went to drive my truck to work, its electric choke wasn't working, which always means the alternator's not working and it's not receiving its juice anymore. So when I hooked my voltage regulator into the old Thunderbird, it seems like it fried it. So that would lead me to believe that we have a wiring issue that's frying voltage regulators. And then I thought about that for a minute, and I was like, well, we must have a dead short in our power system somewhere. And then I was like, oh yeah, duh, I know we do. The stupid fuel gauge. Every time you turn the ignition stick on, the fuel gauge goes meow all the way to the overfull to the all the way, which means it's shorted to ground. So I jacked the back of the car up, got the wheels off. By the way, taking the wheels off of a 64 Thunderbird is involved, especially if you don't just have a lift like we don't. You gotta like jack up the back corner of the car, and then you gotta come under the axle, and you gotta jack that up separate, because if you just lift the whole car from the axle, the wheel's too tucked into that fender well, and you just can't. See, right now she's at maximum droopage, so when you lift the car with that, it's just way up in there and the tire won't come out. Guess how I know. So it's a couple jack stand situation to take your one wheel off. But anywho, you see I've got my drum off over here. Things are looking not too horrible in the drum brake department on this 125% of it. But if you get back up in there, you see their new fuel tank, and there's that sending unit wire. It was upside down before. It's weird, because that wire fits better when you flip it the wrong way. It slides right into the connections, and when you have it flipped the right way, it's kind of finicky to get it to plug in. But yeah, that was simple at least, because I noticed that when I unplugged that, the thing wasn't grounded out. And my thinking there was, if my wiring to the sending unit was ground out, I was thinking that when I unplug it, the gauge would still be pegging over grounded out. And it didn't, so that led me to believe that we were backwards. I got the little plug to flip on the other way, which sure looks like the way it should go, because you see all the guys pointed up instead of pointed down, and the wiring harness goes up. But yeah, anyway, that was pretty sweet. Now, the fuel gauge works. And I'm pretty sure that means I could put a voltage regulator in the car and it might not just burn it out, and she may charge again. Now I'm going to pause on that because I don't have a new regulator yet. And we're just going to get right into the brakes. Why don't we? You can see she looks really old and dingy in there. And I'll be really surprised if the old wheel cylinder here doesn't leak brake fluid. But you can tell somebody's been through these brakes in the last couple of years. Oh, also, I learned 8 years, I believe, is what my buddy said, how long this car was parked before he bought it. So yeah, getting her moving and stopping for the first time in 8-10 years, something like that. But anyway, I've done come to the back side over here where you can't see, and sprayed on my bleeder valve. So here next we're going to see if we can't crack open, not this one first, but the furthest away from the master cylinder over there. We'll see if we can't get that bleeder screw cracked open and start bleeding a little fluid around in the system and see how many places it leaks out of. Probably a lot. But have a look at these big beefy drums. I don't know if that's just like standard 60s car equipment, but it's weird how huge the drums are and how far that like lip comes over. And this is pretty cool. I just learned on this side how to take these, I don't even know what you would call them, the fancy fender cover, wheel cover things off of the wheel wells. Look at the appendage. So this thing like clips up in here, and that top bit holds onto the inner lip on the car, and you pop this down and go whoop. That's how you take the thing on and off. Never actually seen one of these before, so that's pretty cool learning how it goes on and off. See, there's these pins around the edge of the bodywork that holes in this thing line up with, and then when you push that in place, you just take this handle and lift up on it, and it like clips into its spot there, and that's what holds these things on. That little guy is in here going on the inside of this pinch. Woo! And then to take it off and lift the little thing. Yeah, that's cool. That's also really cool. I did not expect these drums to just come off. Looks pretty good on this side too. Besides the excess buildup there. Oh, wait a minute. I was initially thinking that all this dust right here, yeah, that's actually dust. I was initially thinking that that was like brake fluid or axle grease, but I just realized something. Yeah, 3/4 of the shoe is gone on the front side. So all this dust is from that. God dang it. Yeah, she might need a brake job. Previous owner must have lived on a dirt road. Can you see my tile? Ew. I've cleaned up on inside the wheel well here. That bump stop area there was slap full of the dirt and mud. I actually got the bleeder valve on our first wheel to crack open without just stripping out. And we've got our little if it'll focus in on it, nope, maybe, yeah, there you go, you see it. We got our little standalone 9000 brake bleeder kit from O'Reilly's all hooked up over there. We've got no fluid movement yet. I've got that bleeder screw loose, took it completely out, made sure it was all clean, and there's no fluid moving to this side or to this side of the rear. Same thing here, got the bleeder screw out and cleaned it up. I even came up here to the front left and got its bleeder screw pulled all the way out. Somehow we're 3 for 4 not breaking the bleeder screw off. However, that's where the good news ends, because I've just been pumping and pumping away, trying like short pumps at the top and long deep pumps, and it's just, she's not moving fluid. The fluid level in the master has like gone down ever so slightly, but I think the only reason it's gone down at all is because on the backward stroke, when the pedal's coming back up very slowly, it looks like we're starting to seep fluid out between the back of the master cylinder and the front of the brake booster. So I'm speculating the seals in our master cylinder are shot, and even when I have 3 of the bleeder screws all the way out, we've got 0 fluid going from the master cylinder reservoir to anywhere else. So yeah, I think we're going to need to pop a new master cylinder in there before we can get the fluid to move from there to anywhere else. But hey, at least the fuel gauge works. So while we're working on the brakes, it'd be great to go ahead and get these soft lines. There's 2 in the front, 1 on each wheel, and in the back there's a soft line that goes from hard line, goes down the driver's side, turns the corner, goes straight back, and then there's a big piece of soft line that goes to the axle so she can have the up and down movementations. So either our master cylinder is completely shot, which is what I'm leaning towards, or the soft lines have rotted and fell apart on the inside in all the years that this car sat, and they've just blocked off the pipes and the fluid can't go anywhere. But I really think it's probably just the master, because we sure have pedal movement, and the pedal's gotten like slightly harder the more I've worked at it, but there's still no fluid going anywhere. So with the lack of resistance on my foot on the pedal, I'm thinking our seals are just blown out. Anyway, moving forward with the non-chargulating system, it does appear that our regulator is working, because I just had the car fired up and running, and when I probulate my wires over here, see, regulator, wires. Other white wire is the field chargulator, and while I have it all the time, it seems like I have 5 volts here, and then when I start the car and have it running, I still have 5 volts here, and that's making good connection with the other end of the alternator. So it looks like the regulator's doing its thing, the alternator's just not charging. And I went a step further here. You may be able to tell this blue wire I wired straight into the end of the field energizer, and even when we put 12 volts onto the field, we see no difference here on our digital readout output on the battery. She stays at 12 point something or another. Doesn't go up, doesn't go down. Well, it would go down if we let it keep running. But yeah, looks like right now we need to add brake fluid mover, master cylinder, and alternator to the parts list, because I'm pretty sure the field is shorted out or broken or something. The field section of the alternator is not working, because I know if you jump power straight to that field and nothing's happening, then the problem is the field in the alternator. At least it looks like the regulator's working. That's cool. But yeah, next step, add a few more parts, get the charging system charging, and then we can go all over the whole car trying to figure out electrodigitals when the electrodigital box isn't being drained empty. They really don't like that. She's not a deep cycle. They don't like to deep cycle. So I'm pulling the alternator out to go ahead and bring it with me to the O'Reilly's tomorrow for a core for another one, and I happened to notice it. Do you see the fins on our cooling fan, or the lack thereof rather? Let me bring you around and show you the one. Yeah, see the one right here? See how wide that is down there at the base, and how all of them are just mangled off and flat? That's not moving too much air anymore. I bet that overheated the guy pretty good. So then I started thinking, I better go ahead and hang it back in place and figure out why the fins got chewed off probably, before we put a new one in and chew its fins off. And then I noticed, for one thing, it was hard to get it loose because it's like almost at full inward travail on the belt. So it's like the belt's too short, and I think I seen what happened to our fins. The stick down here plate that holds the bottom side of the alternator, the one with the track in it so you can adjust your tightness. When this thing is over here so far, like it has to be because the belt's so short, it puts those fins into that guy. But if our belt was like 3, maybe even 4 inches longer, we'd be way out here, and the fins clear the bracket up top and the bracket down low. Anywho, on top of that, I started playing with the rubbing compound over here. Can't quite read the constructions on it anymore, but I just started rubbing it on with the blue shop rags. And if you'll notice, up here is untreated area, and you see how there's a little bit of light shining, like it's got a little shine to it, but it's pretty dingy and discolory looking. Over here, if this comes up well on camera, is where I went and hit it with the rubbing compound, and then I wiped all that off really good, and I hit it with some spray wax and wipe that down. And of course the car was already clean before I started all that. But if I can move you back and forth here, I'm hoping you can see the difference. Up on top too, she like makes the reflections now. I still got to finish doing like the hood and the front section of the car, but I got most of from that way. But just check onto it. I hope you can see the shiny lines that I can see. Hear my water pump? Ow. Yeah, that's what that loud racket is up front while she's idling. Also, it's lots of bearing play. Yep, there you go. See how much she moves up and down? That's not good. So we're gonna talk to my buddy, probably throw a water pump in it while I'm down in here in the charge and whirler department. And yeah. Right, Bagel? Yeah. Yeah. Water whirler, charge and whirler, longer belt, all sorts of stuff. PB blaster, engine degreaser. Yeah. I just got my space all set up. I cleared my table off so I could have a table like the fancy YouTubers with their stuff laid out. And look onto the fluids and the cleaners and the paint for water pumps and parts under the hood and undercooting and stuff. And this is about the largest accumulation of the parts that I've ever had. Over here we've got a water pump, front and rear brake shoes. We found us a master cylinder, that wasn't easy, and a new power steering pump, plus the electrodigital charger. And also I got a belt a couple inches longer. Also there's one more little box under there. That's for my truck. Everything else is for the old Thunderbird. But right now here under the hood, I just got the coolant drained out and removed on my first radiator hose right here. And we're taking the 2-3 bolts, I think it's just 2 of them, bolts loose from this guy. He's like the coolant reservoir slash thermostat housing. He does it all. So it's like hooked in underneath there. You see my little downward swooping pipe. He ties into where the thermostat lives. So I'm going to pop that out of the way. And we're going to move anything else we need to move to get down to the water pump. And then we'll get it pulled off, clean things real nice like. And we'll have, what color is that? Some kind of silver. Wait, she's called cast coat aluminum. Okay. Now I've removed on that front panel up here. Couple bolt, and that's a Bagel. Hey Bagel. And down here, I took the upper and lower transmission lines loose, the rubber bits from where they connect here, from our transmission heater, and got the lower rad hose loose. And down here, might be way too dark. Yeah, but up here, behind the bumper, there's 2 bolts what hold the lower part of our AC condenser to the core support down there, and there's 2 more bolts further eastward on the bottom what hold the bottom of the radiator to the core support down there. Now I've removed on those 4 because we don't want to take any of those lines loose, just in case the air conditioning works. We don't want to lose all our freons. So I'm going to support this side too, keep that held up out of the way, and then I believe our agitator might be free enough to come out. And the only reason we're pulling it out is because there's no other good way to get to the bolts on that fan. Yep. So, got my power steering pump taken loose. It had the tensioner bolt here and the top mounty Sweeney bolt up there. Both were incredibly loose. And then there's the pressure feed over here, which had that convenient little line to take loose, and the return line. And now, oh my goodness, that's very heavy. And now the power steering pump's out. Right. Well, this is pretty typical to how the way that it goes normally. But you see we're all torn down. I've got the water pump removed. And while we're down here, I've discovered one more problem. You see our rotor button up here? Pay close attention to that. I think I have you aimed where you can see the crank pulley too. Nope. No, I don't. Yep. Yeah, but pay attention to the non-RP image of our rotor button up here as I spin the crank. You see how many degrees I'm going back and forth, and not until there that it starts to turn. And if you listen closely, you might can hear, you might not, but I definitely hear chain sloppage in there. So while we're down here, I probably need to degrease the heck out of this and pull that timing cover off. Because I have a feeling she's got the original timing chain set, and it says 73,000 on the odometer. It's probably like 273, at least maybe 173,000. That's probably the original timing chain down there, being as it's down there. Yeah. Down here underneath, I finally found a neat way to hold my hold the engine still, keep it from spinning, so I could take that bolt out of the crank pulley. Yeah. Finally got my got the big bolt out, and then there's 3 other little bolts that hold on. Get it over to the light. That hold on this contraption, the big 3 belt drive guy. It just like slips right over that one little single V-belt drive. That's got the dampener on it. This does. The little guy has the damper on it. So now I've got my little 3-way pulley guy hooked up. We'll get that slid off. Little update on our parts pile. Got a timing chain. Wasn't very expensive on account of she's the 2-gear single chain setup, so that's nice. 2 of the wheel cylinders came in. Woohoo! Also, while I was busy trying to figure out how to hold the engine still, that took a while, I went ahead and cleaned up really well on all the inside bits of the metal framework here up front, and I made it all one color again. Most of it was black anyway, so I got it with this black with the metallic on it. Still a little rough looking, but it's all one color. And she's got the clear. Yep, so that looks nice. Now I can get this lid off, and then we can pull our timing cover. Probably gonna have to get the fuel pump off of it first. Then we can pull our timing. Well, this is kinda neat. See, I had to pull the keyway out of our spot right here, because there's this like collar extender majigger thing here. Yeah. So that slides on, and I guess is like a extension tubey thing for our crank pulley dampener to back up to. Ooh. Yeah, now it's not in the way of pulling the cover off. So that's good. We're gonna need a seal. Dang it. As it turns out, my suspicion of a sloppy timing chain was correct. Yeah, that's gonna be why she runs like garbage at an idle and then does okay when you hit the throttle. I bet our performance is gonna increase a lot, because what that slop is doing is it's making it where our cam and our valve timing is late and or early as compared to the piston timing. So every time you're on the throttle, it's one way. When you're letting off, it's the other way. And then while you're trying to maintain speed, she's just kind of floating back and forth and changing your performance, changing your valve timing. Right. Well, that about does it for this, the second video in the Thunderbird Revival series. In the next one, you'll get to see a whole lot more progress, but not yet. That's like towards the middle-y part of the next video. Anyway, thanks for watching. We're getting to be like 38 minutes long, so that wraps up this here part 2, and we'll see you in part 3, where we start reassembling, putting our timing chain back on and putting everything back together and cleaning up and painting things. And hopefully by the end of that video we'll be all done under the hood with all the problems that we found, and we'll be moving into working on the brakes and doing the undercoating on the underside. Yeah, thanks for watching. Comment, like, subscribe. Subscribe for the rest of the videos. Hi, buddy. Subscribe for buddy. Mm-hmm.